All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call the May 14th, 2020 Planning Commission for the City of Santa Barbara to order. The first order of business is to have our staff call the roll call, and to do that, I am going to go off webcam and ask our other 6 commissioners to please turn on your webcams. You can see each other, and for the public to see us. Will that be Ms. Rydell calling the roll today?
Yes, Chair Schwartz, I will be handling roll call and all roll call votes. So if you are ready, I will begin.
Yes,
Chair Schwartz?
Do we have here?
Vice Chair Wiscombe?
Here.
Commissioner Bonderson? I saw Commissioner Bonderson, but I did not. I'm not sure if our audio is working.
I was muted. I apologize. I am here.
No problem. There we go. Commissioner Escobedo?
Here.
Commissioner Higgins?
Here.
Commissioner Lodge?
Here.
And Commissioner Reed?
Here.
All right. Thank you so much. All members are present.
Very good. We are back. Thanks to everyone. It's so good to see all of the commissioners and staff. Thank you for doing the sound check a few moments ago. Let me just also share with the public, this meeting is being conducted electronically. However, there are other ways to view our Planning Commission hearings, and I just want to recap this for the public. We have television coverage, and that's broadcast live on City TV Channel 18 and online at the city's website. We also are going to be inviting electronic participation today. And I'm going to ask staff, if you have a moment, staff, as we did at our last hearing, to please relay to the public how they can participate today. There are a couple of vehicles for participation. Would one of the staff members be able to help us with that? I think we had a slide last time that was very illustrative for the public.
Yes, Chair Schwartz. Thank you, Timmy, for pulling up the slide. We're trying to make this as easy as possible for members of the public to participate in a webinar. Naturally, they are welcome and invited to email public comments in advance of the meeting, which Ms. Rydell always forwards you. But in the case of public comment in the webinar, they would go to their GoToWebinar control panel, click on the hand icon, and I will call their name as they registered for the meeting, and then they'll have 2 minutes to speak. And we also have a helpful timer up to also just show how much time. So there's a visual cue of how much time is left. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Kokinda. We're going to go slowly when we get to that portion because it takes some new logistical comfort and skill to do that. Some members of the public have asked what grants the Planning Commission as public officials to conduct our hearings electronically. And I just want to read from a public notice that went out recently noticing the general public to our meetings. So this is under the governor's order N-29-20, which allows the Planning Commission to hold meetings via teleconferences or other electronic meeting format while still meeting the state's open and public meeting requirements. Ms. Kokinda just reviewed the electronic participation opportunities, and we certainly welcome robust public participation. Thank you very much for that. With that, I would like to make just some opening remarks because again, we're still in these extraordinary times. And I want to express, as I'm sure my colleagues would support me in expressing a deep gratitude to our essential workers in our community and of course all across the country who continue to put their lives and their families' lives in harm's way, literally, by serving us. And just to identify a few sectors, we have our healthcare workers, first responders, food service providers, trash recycle providers, our MTD bus drivers, and our postal service workers. And in closing for my preliminary remarks, you heard in my last couple of hearing remarks, I quoted our California governor, Gavin Newsom, but today I want to do something a little different because I've also been watching New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, and there were 3 comments that he made recently, also in honor of my parents who were New Yorkers, may they rest in peace. 3 inspiring comments that I think should inspire the Planning Commission and guide us. He asked, what actions are we taking to shape our future? Do we have a vision for a better tomorrow? And thirdly, how do we make it a better tomorrow? So I view those questions and the inspiration behind them and the call to action behind them as very central to the Planning Commission's work. So thank you for indulging me to provide those preliminary remarks. And now we'll go to our preliminary matters. The first one is to staff to provide us with any requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of ex-agenda items. Ms. Ostranger, please.
Chair Schwartz, commissioners, just quickly, I received a text from Ms. DeBusk, and she's having computer problems, and I don't believe she's booted back up yet. She's trying to get on. So I don't know, I couldn't speak to A, so can we give Ms. DeBusk a couple minutes to get back on?
Sure, and Ms. Ostranger, let me ask you, since you and I have had a communication about one item, would it be appropriate under the category of postponements to mention a postponement of one of our items that is under the administrative agenda? Can we do that at this juncture?
Yes, thank you, Chair Schwartz. I'll go ahead and mention that. I have to apologize to the commissioners. We were scheduled for motion and findings trainings today. And I know some of you were really looking forward to that. Unfortunately, we're going to be postponing that. The reason is, which is the good news, Council on April 28th directed staff to expedite certain portions of our AUD ordinance, particularly within the central business district. So that created a reprioritization of my work and a lot of staff's work. So I unfortunately wasn't able to get the training materials together. I'm hoping that I might be able to get it on next week's agenda, but I don't want to overpromise because these AUD amendments, it is taking a lot of work that I hadn't anticipated. So again, I apologize for that. Also, as part of the training, I think we'll be adding ex parte communications, which as the commissioners probably know, that refers to communications that you receive from interested parties, members of the public, on items that are before you for determination, and your need to, if you have such communications, which are discouraged, to relay them to the public before the hearing so that everyone knows what has been expressed.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ostrander. We're going to be looking forward to that training very much. And so now let me come back to see if Ms. DeBusk has been able to rejoin us. If not, I'm going to go to the next item under preliminary matters, and we can come back to Ms. DeBusk.
Chair Schwartz, it doesn't look like she's been able to log back in just yet. So if you wouldn't mind to please continue.
Okay, very good. Ms. Kokinda, I'm not sure if you know if there are any other matters before us that Ms. DeBusk may have relayed to you.
Unfortunately, I was not, I'm not aware of anything specific, but she may have
Okay.
something to share.
Okay, then I think at this point, to the commissioners, we're going to go to our next item, which is item C, and that's to review and consider action by the draft Planning Commission meeting minutes and resolutions. So we have before us April 9th Planning Commission meeting minutes, and we have April 16th meeting minutes, and then finally resolution number 002-20, 1 Clyde Adams Road. So are there any commissioners who would like to make any changes to any of those documents? You can just turn on your webcam and let's proceed. Okay, I don't see any webcams on. I'll wait a moment. If there are not any changes, I think we can be expeditious and just take them all together. Would any of the commissioners like to move and second approval of these 3 items? Commissioner Wiscombe, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're taking them all together. Is that correct?
I didn't, yes, because I didn't see anybody wanting to
Okay.
discuss any of them individually.
Then I move approval of April 9th, 2020 minutes, April 16th, 2020 commission minutes, and Planning Commission resolution number 002-20 for 1 Clyde Adams Road. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. So we have a first and a second. And let's do a, if staff would please do a voice vote, just because we're in this virtual mode, we want to make sure we get all the votes noted very clearly.
Yes, Chair Schwartz, this is Heidi Rydell. I will conduct the roll call vote now. Chair Schwartz,
Aye.
Vice Chair Wiscombe,
Aye.
Commissioner Bonderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Escobedo,
Aye.
Commissioner Higgins,
Aye.
Commissioner Lodge,
Aye.
Commissioner Reed.
Aye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to everyone. And at this point, we're going to go to any comments from members of the public pertaining to items not on our agenda today. Ms. Kokinda, do we have anyone contacting us to speak on any other items?
I currently do not see any members of the public joining by webinar. And I would just ask Ms. Rydell if there was any written comment received.
We have not received any written comment in the PC secretary inbox. Thank you.
And then Chair Schwartz, I
Okay,
also just wanted to let you know that, Timmy, if you could go back to the preliminary matters slide. I did receive a text message from Mrs. DeBusk, and she said that for item B, that there are no announcements or appeals that she would wanted to make. So just wanted to fill you in.
Okay, and nothing else under A, I presume, which is the continuances, withdrawals, or issues.
Correct.
Okay, very good. So we'll continue on. We have a new item, and that is application of Patsy Price of Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck, agent for Goleta West Sanitary District, 1 Clyde Adams Road. And so we are going to staff or applicant presentation. Is that from you, Mr. Bermond, or is it from Ms. Price today?
It is. I'll be giving the staff presentation.
Great, thanks to see you again.
Likewise, and I apologize for the sense of deja vu. You just approved a resolution for another item at this same address, but the Goleta West Sanitary District has a few different projects going on, as you know. So the item before you now is the proposed addition of a new administration building at the Goleta West Sanitary District and the demolition of a garage and shop building. If we can advance to the next slide. And so, yes, here we go. If we can advance one further. I have some background. As I mentioned, there were 2 previous approved but not constructed projects that have been before Planning Commission. Recently, a a flood wall was approved, a coastal development permit for a flood wall was approved back in November. And last month on April 16th, Planning Commission approved the coastal development permit for some changes to the equipment garage and restructuring of Pump Station 2 to an operations building. For the purposes of this presentation and report, the application is assumed to, this project is assumed to follow those two previously approved projects and to ensure that conditions of approval E1 and E2 in Exhibit A are meant to reflect that a certificate of occupancy won't be issued until both those projects are completed. So we'll move forward into the project plans. As with the previous project, it's located at the Goleta West Sanitary District, which is behind UCSB's police and fire station just north of Mesa Road and on Santa Barbara Airport property in the city of Santa Barbara, adjacent to the Goleta Slough Ecological Reserve. The next slide shows that campus in more detail. The project site is the existing garage and shop building that would be demolished and replaced with this blue polygon that's reflective of the proposed project. I have the floor plan is the next slide. And that just briefly has on, I would normally use my cursor here, but on the left side, there's a the entrance, which faces Clyde Adams Road. There's a reception area, 3 offices, a pair of men's and women's restrooms, a break room, and then the larger open space there on the right is a board meeting room for the district board. And then additionally, on the south side, some existing hardscape would be replaced with a semi-permeable courtyard with some fountains and landscaping. So I will move in to the coastal development permit application. The standard for review is on the next slide. As you're already familiar, the standards for review of a coastal development permit are consistency with the policies of the California Coastal Act, as well as consistency with the implementing local coastal plan, zoning ordinance, and other guidelines. So I will go briefly over those. They're strikingly similar to last month's, but the project would not change public access or recreation or marine environment as required in the Coastal Act, would not change or introduce new populations to flood hazard, would be relatively consistent with the development in the surrounding area. With respect to the local coastal plan, there's no change in the base flood elevation. It's not in a known cultural sensitivity zone, so we've not required any special archaeological studies. It's not anticipated to impact any scenic views or create a new utility impact. However, with respect to policy C4, this does require a little bit more detail as previously. The project site is located within a 100-foot buffer from the Goleta Slough Ecological Reserve. As you can see from this drawing, I've tried to mark approximately the location of that 100-foot buffer. Most of their campus is within that 100-foot buffer. Pulling the sanitary district campus back to fall within that buffer is would not provide sufficient area for the district to operate its campus. So we are considering that infeasible. And additionally, staff found that this structure would not create a new encroachment because it's entirely on existing fill and paved surface. So it's an intensification within the 100-foot buffer, but it is not an encroachment upon the 100-foot buffer. Additionally, with respect to the airport design guidelines, these are very broad guidelines that are really meant to direct the airport to provide attractive leasable facilities and of course an airline terminal and other necessary equipment. The The building is roughly consistent with the buildings elsewhere on the campus, as well as the drawings, of course, were designed to be consistent with the application viewed last month for the operations building. The buildings are in the same architectural modernist vernacular of the university structures in that area, and ABR reviewed them and made the project compatibility findings. So it seems that this relatively broad standard is easily met there. Additionally, with respect to consistency with the zoning ordinance, this site is zoned as the aviation facilities zone, which does not include anything specific to utilities or wastewater pumping. However, it does include subsection T, which allows for non-aviation related uses that are not in conflict with aviation, as determined by both the community development and airport directors who made those findings a few years ago, actually, for this project. So I'll move on now to the development plan application, which is concurrent with the coastal development permit. The standard for review there is compliance with the zoning ordinance, as just previously discussed. In Title 28, which this still is because this is in the coastal zone, the standard includes consistency with the principles of sound community planning, which is again another open standard, and should not impact community aesthetics based on the project compatibility analysis made by the Architectural Board of Review, as well as consistency with the city's traffic management strategy. So I'll go through each of those. The probably paramount to considering a development plan is an accounting of the floor area. So I'll start there. The proposed demolition of the garage and shop building provides 1,353 square feet that could be replaced under this project. Additionally, the application considered last month had a surplus of demolition in Pump Station 2, which was the proposed operations building. That surplus is 1,488 square feet. That leaves a deficit of 457 square feet. That would be an allocation from the vacant land category. So strictly speaking, this project has built within it a replacement of the 13,053 square feet of the garage and shop building that is being demolished as part of the project. And so the development plan includes Planning Commission's allocation of both the previously approved but not completed demolition floor area, as well as an allocation of this vacant land category. So that's why in the staff report, it mentions an allocation of 1,945 square feet. I'll move on to both zoning and sound community planning. I've put together on one slide. We've already discussed the aviation facility zone. Additionally, the standard for sound community planning that I apply is similar to the coastal development permit, that you are consistent with the general plan and other implementing governing documents. So the general plan has some land use policies with respect to managing floor areas I've just discussed, as well as the wise use and adaptive reuse of existing facilities that I think are applicable and relevant to this project. The airport master plan is a sort of specific plan for this parcel, and it includes the guiding principles that state that the airport and tenants should strive to be safe and generate sustainable adaptive development, and also to be a good neighbor with adjacent jurisdictions. As you know, the airport is surrounded on all sides by other political entities. As well, I also thought to mention that the Goleta West Sanitary District exists on airport property under a license agreement that was adopted by City Council in the 1960s. It includes an allowance for appurances and appurtenant structures, which is a reasonably interpretation that the administration building falls under that relatively broad definition. As I've mentioned already, this project had been before the Architectural Board of Review back in 2017. It was at that time continued to PC, and the project compatibility criteria had been met. Additionally, I want to mention that with respect to the traffic management strategy on the next slide, the MND that was prepared by Goleta West Sanitary District and adopted by Goleta West Sanitary District includes an analysis of traffic. It finds that because it would be reducing office space on the campus and then replacing it with this new administration building, it results in no net increase in traffic. And therefore, the MND concludes that there's no new peak hour trip contribution to any impacted intersection, and therefore it can be found consistent because it's not applying any new trip contribution. As I alluded to, there is a mitigated negative declaration that Planning Commission as responsible agency, just to overview, the City of Santa Barbara is a responsible agency in this case, having permit authority over this property, but the Goleta West Sanitary District as a special district is the lead agency. So the action that is recommended in your findings is to consider the MND, not to adopt. That MND was adopted by Goleta West Sanitary District back in 2017. I should also point out two matters here. There was an addendum in 2019 that this commission considered back for the floodwall project in November. That is also a part of the CEQA record. And also that through this review process, this project was reviewed and commented on by the Goleta Slough Management Committee, which is a interagency meeting group that meets with a specific interest in matters relating to the Goleta Slough. So I just wanted to mention both of those because neither were mentioned in the staff report. I will now go over each of the identified mitigations really briefly. They're in more detail in the MND. With respect to biological resources, the project could encroach on the Goleta Slough, and so mitigation measures Bio 1 and 2 limit construction within the existing impacted envelope, existing developed area, as well as providing best management practices and specific requirements to crews to avoid both spills of material as well as excessive noise from construction. With respect to cultural resources, although it is not in the cultural sensitivity zone, it is possible in the area of the Goleta Slough that unforeseen archaeological resources may be discovered during ground disturbance. And so both mitigation measures CUL 1 and 2 are applying standard conditions that we would apply for any project at the airport. Those are also included as mitigation measures that require both an archaeologist and Native American monitor in any unanticipated discovery. With respect to geology and soils, there is a seismic hazard present in the Goleta Slough. Mitigation measure GO1 includes a number of, I believe it's 8 recommended measures from the geotechnical report as required construction elements, just to make sure that it meets our earthquake code. With respect to hydrology, the project site is in an area that is intense, that is expected to be subject to sea level rise eventually, although not within the anticipated 75-year life of the building. It is hardly assured. So mitigation measure HYD1 requires the Goleta West Sanitary District to participate in and coordinate with the Goleta Slough Management Committee on sea level rise adaptation measures as those evolve over the years. And so I will conclude staff's presentation with a summary of the recommendation. That is that the Planning Commission make the findings on page 10 of the staff report, approving a coastal development permit and a development plan and considering the MND, all subject to the conditions of approval that are included in Exhibit A. And Patsy Price is the applicant on behalf of Goleta West Sanitary District. In addition, we have Mark Nation, who's the general manager, and Eduardo Galingo, who's the architect, that are available for questions, as am I. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vermond. So before us today, we do have a coastal development permit and a development plan, but before we go to commissioner questions, I'd like to ask staff if there are any members of the public who have contacted us for comment on this item. Either Ms. Kokinda or Ms. DeBusk. I'll wait a moment to see if that's the case.
Thank you, Chair Schwartz. So if you'd like to open up public comment, again, I can show we have the slide up. The members of the public would raise their hand, and then I would call on you and you'd have 2 minutes to speak. We currently do not have any members of the public attending via the webinar, but I'll ask Ms. DeBusk or Ms. Rydell if there were any written comments for this item.
This is Heidi Rydell. We have not received any written correspondence for this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rydell. Thank you, Ms. Kokinda. So with that, let's bring it back to the commission. And what I'm going to do is go off webcam to allow as many commissioners. Let's see, what do we have? We could have 3 commissioners. Where did Mr. Vermond go? Is he still with us? Let me do this. I'm going to go off. Okay, very good. So I'm going to go off webcam and then I'm going to start calling on the commissioners that turn on their webcams for questions at this time. But I'm still on audio. I think I saw Commissioner Wiscombe. Let's just wait till we can load up the webcams from the commissioners.
And part of my information, we have a 6 limit, 6 webcam limit.
Yes. So we have Commissioner Wiscombe on. If there are any, we could have a couple of additional commissioners if you wanted to begin turning on your webcams after Commissioner Wiscombe kicks off the question period. And Commissioner Wiscombe, go ahead and let's, we have a number of applicant representatives here, so let's direct our questions to any of them that would like to turn their webcams back on.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, excellent.
Okay, great. I just had a couple questions. I appreciate the presentation and the thorough staff report. Some of my questions got answered in there. I'll start. I do have page references. So I'll just start the staff report on page 9, hydrology requires the Goleta West Sanitary District to participate with the Goleta Slough Management Committee regarding sea level rise. So who actually does the monitoring to see if the predictions are accurate or if we need additional mitigation measures? Someone answer that? Yeah.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Wiscombe, I can make an effort. That is a collaborative effort as part of the Goleta Slough Management Committee. Specifically, we have both a buoy in Santa Barbara Channel as well as a stream stage in Teclatito Creek in the Goleta Slough that both provide us with regular intervals measurements of the rise and fall of the tides over a very long time series. We use that to extrapolate what the sea level rise rate is. And as that rate changes, that could result in a change in land use strategies. That's not demonstrated by the record at present, but that is anticipated to occur based on our scientific knowledge.
Okay, that's great. I was curious because that wasn't really clear. Thank you for that answer. That clarifies it. And then I don't know who this question would go to, but do you anticipate grading or brush management to take place between the February 1st and July 31st bird breeding season? That's a pretty long period of time. So is there going to be grading or brush management during that time that you're aware of?
Vice Chair Wiscombe, this is Patsy Price, agent for the applicant.
Hi,
Hello.
Ms. Price.
So it is likely that there will be some construction activities, grading within the currently paved disturbed area of the site. Also, the district regularly trims the brush along the southern boundary of the site. So it's possible that that might also be trimmed during that time. We would not be encroaching into that area any more than is already, but it's just a trimming of the brushes that overhang the fence. But we would follow the mitigation measures to do nesting bird studies prior to any planned trimming to ensure that no birds would be disturbed.
Great.
Or nesting birds, we would of course avoid any trimming.
Right. Okay, that's great. So you most likely will do a pre-construction nesting survey. Okay, that's great. Thank you. So my next question in biological resources, this was page 201 of a very lengthy 468-page report. The project will continue to drain to an on-site well on the western edge that is then pumped into the Goleta Sanitary District treatment plant. So I was wondering, how often is this system checked for malfunctions and blockages? The conditions of approval are vague on it, and I'm just curious what the practices are. Maybe Mr. Nation can answer that.
Vice Chair Wiscombe, the system is not specifically checked on any schedule, what have you, but it's the on-site storm drain system. It's all piped to our wet well that the wastewater from the community of Isla Vista and western half of Goleta that we serve comes to. The storm drain pipes are actually very short. They are, we clean them probably once a year just for general purposes to make sure that because we don't want water backing up on our site, then, backing up into buildings from then, just from heavy rains or something. So we don't have them on a regular schedule per se, but they are cleaned probably annually.
Okay, thank you for that. That's great. And then my last question, I think Mr. Bermond, you and I had a email exchange regarding this. If you could, there you are. Okay, and this isn't really a question. It's something that I noticed and I think the email exchange that I'd like to pursue if my fellow commissioners would be in agreement, and that's the condition of the permit that was issued in the conditions of approval that were issued for our previous CDP, which was on April 16, 2020. That it says that the flood wall construction is complete before occupancy, and language in this condition of approval varies from that. So it varies and it's a little bit vaguer. So I would actually like to see the language from the April 16th, 2020 flood wall installation put into this, which also includes, it's a FEMA compliant perimeter flood wall system and an improved emergency evacuation plan prior to issuance of certificate of occupancy. And that would be, if I can find it here. Yeah, it's on page 8 of 9, and it's section E is where we describe it in, I'm sorry, that's the old one. No, it is. It's on page 8 of 9, section E. So I just like to see the language change to add the FEMA compliant perimeter flood wall system and the emergency evacuation plan. And Mr. Bermond, you were fine with that, I think. Is that correct?
Commissioner Wiscombe, that's correct. They're functionally the same effect as to require that the projects be completed in a particular order. I would just ask that If you wish that to be included in the conditions of approval, if you could state that in the motion or whoever's making the
Right.
motion.
Okay. Well, I'll see what my fellow commissioners have to say on it. I was more interested that this one, I don't think what we have up there, what you're showing now, has the, it doesn't actually talk about an approved emergency evacuation plan, does it? Which was one of the conditions of getting the C of O. I don't see that in there. So that's what I was more concerned with, just that we keep the language the same so we're all on the same page with the two permits that you know, this one that's under consideration and the one that we issued on April 16th for the project. So,
And Commissioner Wiscombe, if we could ask Mr. Bolton, who is facilitating for us technically today, to have at the ready this page in the conditions of approval. When we come back during the motion, we can readily access this and then discuss revision as per your recommendations, if that's an agreement among the other commissioners as well.
okay, thank you. Thank you. And that's all I have. And thank you very much for the fine presentation. Those are the only questions that I have. Thank you.
Excuse me, Vice Chairman Wiscombe. This is Ed Valindo. I'm the project architect. And I just want to add something to that. On one of the exhibits, I think it's 25 of 468, you can see the existing garage and shops on the site. The other buildings are to the north of that, the operations building and the equipment garage. In order of sequence, as far as the certificate of occupancies, the first thing that needs to be completed is that perimeter wall. Subsequent to that, the operations building and equipment garage cannot receive the certificates of occupancy until that flood wall is complete. That's correct.
Correct.
Now, for the operations building, for the administration building, then to commence construction, the first thing that would need to happen would be that existing garage and shops building on the south of the property to be demolished. Those buildings cannot be demolished until the operations building is in occupancy. So there is, in order of sequence of construction, the operations building will need to be completed and occupied prior to the demolition of the garage building. And I'm only saying that if you would prefer, that really does not need to be implemented, but it's going to happen as far as the physical sequence of construction.
Okay, yeah, I accept your answer. That's a very good answer. Since the sequencing wasn't clear, I know in the drainage and stormwater quality analysis that was done in 2016, they talk about phase 1 and phase 2, but I didn't actually relate that back to the flood wall. There's very little about the flood wall in this project. So I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of the flood wall being completed before.
On that same exhibit, the dark line that is on the south of the property, that is the perimeter flood wall that is going to be in the area where the new administration building is going to be built. So that will be in place, you can see there, prior to the demolition of that shops building. So that would be in place, operational, as part of that sequence. That would be the first piece. And as I mentioned, the second piece would be the operations building, equipment garage, and then the third piece would be demolition and construction of the admin building.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. Then I'm fine with the way it is then, since we know what the sequencing is. Thank you so much. So, Madam Chair, I don't need to make that have that be considered as part of the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. Are there any other questions from commissioners? We're going to wait a minute to see if Commissioner Reed, questions, please.
Yeah, only question I have was, my assumption is that there will be ongoing operations during the construction of this phase of the project. And it looks like all the available parking will be removed under the demolition plan. Is there a plan for temporary parking for the operations during this phase of construction?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Reed, there isn't one that has been submitted to the city as of yet. That will be a required submittal as part of the building permit application. They'll have to identify what location the on-site temporary parking would occur.
Thank you.
Any other questions from, no, Commissioner Reed? Okay. Any other questions from other commissioners at this time? I'll wait a moment to see if there are any other webcams that come on. Okay, I'm not seeing that, so let's go to our deliberations. How about comments from the commissioners? If there are comments before we go to a motion and a second pertaining to the findings that we need to make today. Again, I don't know if we have a separate screen up on the coastal development permit and development plan. Okay, I'm going to come back on with my webcam. Commissioner Wiscombe, ready for deliberations, please?
Yeah, I'll just make some brief comments. I think that the materials provided are very thorough, very well thought out. It's been to ABR and the architecture is compatible. Creek's review is deemed compliant according to the staff report. And I like the architecture of the building, and I can certainly support the project and support the findings and the CDP and development plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a second by another commissioner? Someone like to turn on their webcam and audio? Commissioner Reed?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Very good. Any discussion on the motion by Commissioner Wiscombe with a second from Commissioner Reed? Okay, I'm not hearing that there's an interest in a discussion. So I'm going to, yes, did you want to say one more thing?
I actually didn't make a motion because I wanted to hear from my fellow commissioners. So if we could just have a discussion then on that. I'm happy to make that a motion since it's gone that far, but I was really more interested in just telling what I thought. So if you want to leave it on the table as a motion that's been seconded, and then I'm interested in hearing from my fellow commissioners.
Yes, yes, I apologize. I thought that I had opened it up for discussion, and I thought that was a motion. So a discussion among the commissioners on the motion. I don't want to rush, giving everybody time to use the technology that we're now using as our communication devices here. Commissioner Higgins, did you want to chime in on any deliberations here, a discussion? I saw your webcam on. Now, Commissioner Lodge.
I just want to say that I concur with what Vice Chair Wiscombe had to say, and I can support the project.
Okay, very good. It sounds like I'm going to go a little slowly here to see if there's anything else. If not, we have a motion and a second. No further discussion or deliberations. I'm going to turn my webcam off and ask the other commissioners to come on. And Ms. Rydell, if you would please conduct a voice vote.
This is Heidi Rydell. I will begin the roll call vote. Chair Schwartz.
Aye.
Vice Chair Wiscombe.
Aye.
Commissioner Bonderson.
Aye.
Commissioner Escobedo.
Aye.
Commissioner Higgins.
Aye.
Commissioner Lodge,
Aye.
Commissioner Reed.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous. Thank you.
Very good. That concludes our item. There is a 10-day appeal period for this project. And with that, let's move right along to our administrative agenda. As we heard at the outset of our hearing today from Ms. Ostringer, we are deferring, hopefully to a date in the very near future, her training to us on the making of motions and findings, along with ex parte communication disclosures. So if we're ready to turn to Commissioner Escobedo, he's going to give us a very special presentation on his attendance at this year's Planning Commissioners Academy. And I don't know if we have a PowerPoint, or I'll turn it over to you, Commissioner Escobedo. Excellent, there we are.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are you in a position to start, or do we need to take a 5-minute break?
You know, I'd appreciate a 5-minute break if possible.
Okay, so staff, if we could please put that slide up, and we're going to be adjourned. I'm going to round it up. Let's just say it's 1:55 now. So let's return at 2 o'clock if we could do that. That's what I have according to my clock.
And Madam Chair, if I could just ask all the commissioners to go ahead and mute themselves and make sure their webcams are off, and we'll see you shortly.
Very good. Okay, to everyone, let's do that. Thank you. we have a special presentation. Next on deck is Commissioner Escobedo presenting to us from his attendance at this year's Planning Commissioners Academy. Take it away, Commissioner Escobedo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, so this is a debrief of the Planning Commissioners Academy, which I attended in early March, just before COVID really hit Santa Barbara. And so I was fortunate enough to attend, and it took place over 3 days with over 20 different sessions. The topics range from Planning Commission 101 to talking about the future of shared mobility, to getting in the weeds of CEQA. And it was a really interesting experience. And I'd like to take a moment to thank Ms. DeBusk and the City of Santa Barbara for providing that opportunity. It was especially useful as a new planning commissioner. And getting to talk to planning commissioners throughout the state about some of the challenges that their communities are facing, but also some of the successes that they've had, and trying to think about what we could bring back to Santa Barbara. And so while I'm sure the commission would love to hear about everything that I got out of the Planning Commissioners Academy, I thought I would focus on 2 presentations that I saw. And they were really legislative updates. And so next slide, please. So the 2 presentations that I got to see, and I thought that this would be of particular interest to both the commission and staff. And I'm sure there's information in here that the commission or the staff are already aware of, so I apologize if I'm going over it again. But really, it was 2 presentations. The first was from the Housing and Community Development, and the presentation was given by Ms. Mahmood, who works in their Land Use and Planning Division, and it was talking about new funding programs, their new pro-housing designation program they're rolling out this summer and the fall, and then just talking about the variety of resources that HCD has for cities to navigate some of these grant programs or the pro-housing designation program. And then that was shortly followed up by the League of California Cities legislative update, talking about current legislation that's coming down the pipeline, also 6-cycle regional housing needs allocations and what we can expect on the horizon. Some of the governor's legislative priorities when it came to housing, and then the league's housing production proposal. And so before moving on to the next slide, I want to premise this presentation with, this was obviously in the pre-COVID reality, that we know a lot of things have changed, priorities have changed. If anybody's been paying attention to the deficits that are projected for California, we could probably imagine that some of these resources that are discussed in today's proposal might be completely different today or in the future. So I'm just presenting on the information that I was given, and try to do as much research to present the commission with some useful information. So next slide, please. So the first, like I said, was the California Housing and Community Development Update. And we're going to go into some of the funding sources. Many of them focus on early proactive planning and trying to create a regulatory environment that is conducive to generating housing. The second is their new pro-housing designation program and what that means for cities and how do cities qualify for this designation. And then the last is just a few contacts in HCD that could be of use to the city as we try to navigate some of these grant programs. We know we have a precarious situation in terms of funding on the horizon. And so accessing as many grant programs as possible is going to be key. They have also offered assistance with providing model ordinances, toolkits, and then technical assistance in terms of walking us through step by step. Next slide, please. So the first grant program that I wanted to talk about was the Local Early Action Planning Grants, or LEAP grants. What this is, it's a $119 million grant program that was established in the 2019-20 Budget Act. And it's a one-time allocation for cities to update planning documents or implement process improvements. And so some of the jurisdictions that can apply for these grants are cities and counties, city and county governments. And the maximum allocation is dependent on population. And so for the city of Santa Barbara, our maximum allocation would be $300,000. And the purpose is really to, one, accelerate housing production, and then two, make sure that we're compliant when we attempt to implement 6-cycle RHNA when we get our allocation. And just a few examples of some of the types of projects that we could use it on. We're working on an ADU ordinance right now, but soon we're gonna have to update our housing elements, infrastructure planning. So it doesn't have to be directly into housing. It could be some of the resources that support housing. So we're talking about sewage, water systems, transits, roads. So there are a wide variety of projects that we could use this grant funding on. One of the things to pay attention to is that deadline. So the deadline for grant applications is July 1st, 2020. So right around the corner, end of the fiscal cycle. And part of the unique aspect of this grant and the next grant I'm going to talk about is they are non-competitive grants, which means that if we complete our grant application and we get it in, there's going to be funding for us. So that's important to know that we're not competing against other jurisdictions, that we just need to do our due diligence in submitting these applications. Next slide, please. So I just spoke about the local early action planning grants, the LEAP grants. Well, this is a regional early action planning grant, or REAP. And it's a similar size, so $118 million. That's provided to regional entities for similar practices. For Santa Barbara, that regional entity would be SBCAG, or Santa Barbara County Association of Governments, that oversees Santa Barbara County and 8 incorporated cities. Similar to the LEAP grants, the local early action planning grants, it's determined by population. And so for SBCAG, their maximum allotment would be a little under $8 million, $7,900,000. And really same exact goals, same purpose, to accelerate housing production and make sure that we are compliant with 6-cycle RHNA. But the types of projects and the way that it can be used is slightly different. So it could be contracting out work to navigate some expedited processes that can be conducive to generating affordable housing. It could be improving our RHNA methodology, or it could be a sub-allocation to local jurisdictions. This one in particular is pretty attractive because you can use these REAP grants and the sub-allocation to then layer on top of the LEAP grants to accelerate whatever goal that you had set for the city in your LEAP grant application. And what I will show on the next slide please, is that you can also layer these with SB2 planning grants. And so you can create some real synergies in terms of accelerating housing production, but I also, a little misleading, I think more of creating the regulatory framework that allows for that affordable housing development. And later on, when we get onto the League of Cities housing production proposal, we're going to talk about ways that we can possibly fund some of the development. So once we set up the regulatory framework, we still need cash flow and redevelopment dollars in order to really truly get affordable housing. But before we get there, next slide, please. One of the other things that HCD is trying to do is trying to, again, create that regulatory framework that would be conducive to affordable housing by creating some incentives. So we hear about the carrots and the sticks, and oftentimes we talk about the sticks, but they're also trying to create some of those carrots. And this pro-housing designation is one of them. And so the pro-housing designation, really, when we think about it, why is it important? And one of the reasons is that it gives us extra points or preference for certain grant applications, which again, we spoke a little bit earlier about our precarious financial future for at least the next few years. And so those grant applications are going to be really important when we look at housing projects, affordable housing projects, even infrastructure projects. And so some of the grant programs that it gives us extra points for is affordable housing and sustainable communities, transformative climate communities, infill incentive grant programs. So a wide variety of programs that this could be very useful for. They do not have the process set up yet, but it was said that in the summer or fall, whether or not that's changed in our COVID reality, I'm not too sure. I couldn't find anything about that. But they focus on 4 separate categories, and they're pretty broad. Favorable zoning, decreasing permitting timeframes, reducing development costs, and providing financial subsidies. And so a few examples of that can be found on the next slide. Next slide, please. And these kind of narrow it down. You can kind of see where these all fall in each of those 4 categories. So allowing residential mixed uses by right, zoning more sites for residential or increasing densities, allowing for parking reductions, limiting public hearings, ministerial review. So you can look at these, and we're actually working on some of these. Reduction of permit processing time. In the CBD, we might see some parking reductions on the horizon when we take a look at AUD. So there's a possibility, and this is not a comprehensive list. This is just a few examples. So there's a possibility that we might qualify for that pro-housing designation when HCD rolls out the process later this year. Next slide, please. And so really, HCD was really pushing those grant funding programs, but they were also pushing the services that they offer in terms of walking jurisdictions through the process, how to best set ourselves up to take advantage of as much funding as possible. And so I included here 3 different email addresses. I could also, if anyone's interested, I did take down Ms. Mahmood's contact information if anybody wanted that at a later date. But they really, really encourage jurisdictions to take advantage of these grants and to take advantage of the assistance that they're offering in order to navigate their grant programs, the pro-housing program, SB2 technical assistance. So really pushed it pretty hard and left an impact on me that I thought the commission would be interested in. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was a lot of what Housing and Community Development was focusing on was creating that regulatory framework. And there was obviously some funding in there for doing that, but we also need those development dollars. And next slide. And so what I thought would also be of interest to pair with that topic is going over the League of Cities legislative update in terms of what's coming down the pipeline. So you can see here, and this is in March again. So in March, there had already been 300 housing or land use bills introduced. The League identified about a dozen of those that seemed viable. And the focus of that legislation was stimulating housing production, impact and development fees. Yes, another accessory dwelling unit ordinance or law, affordable housing tax credits, and then supportive housing and homelessness. And anybody that's obviously going to change. I imagine that even in the post-COVID reality, housing will still be a component, but I'm not sure to what extent. One of the things that I found really interesting is talking about the current reality and what's on the horizon, and then linking that to what the League of Cities had proposed. And so if we go to the next slides, we'll kind of talk about what's coming up. And I think everyone heard me mention it last meeting and kind of prompted this presentation, but 6th cycle regional housing needs allocation is on the horizon, and it's coming. And one of the themes that I heard from both Ms. Mahmood from Housing and Community Development and Mr. Ryan, who presented on behalf of the League of Cities, is that we can expect an increase, and likely a significant increase, in our regional housing needs allocation. And to demonstrate that, they provided 4 cities that have already received their allocation. And I'll premise this with saying the populations of these cities are not comparable to Santa Barbara, but I think if we look at the common theme, we can kind of guess what we can expect. So in that black bar there, that's going to be their 5th cycle RHNA. That gray or white bar there, that's going to be the additional units that were that added to the 5th cycle numbers. And then that yellow number is going to be total units for 6th cycle. Additional commentary that was added by Mr. Ryan was that it might be more difficult to include sites that were used for previous cycles if we can't justify that there's actual potential for development there. And then just a thought that crossed my mind is 6th cycle might be challenging for us, especially given that we might downzone the Milpas corridor. And so finding that extra density poses a challenge for the city as we kind of think about that. So we know this is coming, but what else might be coming from the governor's office is also a question. To get a sense of that, I'd like to discuss some of his priorities pre-COVID. Next slide, please. And so when the governor was elected, he had very ambitious goals for California when it came to housing. He wanted to produce 3.5 million units by 2025. And I think we know we almost certainly won't reach those goals, but that ambitious goal speaks to how much weight this issue holds with him. And some of the ways in which he wanted to reach those ambitious goals, or at least create the environment to reach those ambitious goals, he listed 4. So the first is revamping RHNA. I think the governor recognizes that there are aspects of the RHNA process that can be improved. We were told that not to expect diminish ambitious goals for jurisdictions, but that there might be a more fair way to allocate out some of the units. Accountability is another one. So the governor set aside around $10 million to, 1, change policy, but also hold jurisdictions accountable in removing barriers to produce more housing. The third, he intended to work with the legislator to change local zoning and streamline permitting processes, in particular close to transit. So we know that SB 50 bill failed, but I think aspects of that we're going to continue to see in the near future. And then homelessness. He really wanted to focus on preventative healthcare, and then housing as well, a housing first approach. And so next slide, please. And so we pair that, and I think Mr. Ryan did a really good job of how do we match, and this is the League of Cities talking, how does the League of Cities match some of the goals that the governor had and some of the ambition around housing that exists in the legislature? And how do they pair that with some of the needs of local jurisdictions, right? We all want to make sure that we can get out of this housing crisis, but how do we address some of the concerns that local jurisdictions have? And so he put them in two buckets. He put them in a near-term action bucket, which has most of the agenda in there, and then he put one item in a long-term action bucket. And so for in this first bucket, the first bullet there is, how do we get new funding to support affordable housing? So I talked about this earlier in saying that we want to create a regulatory framework that allows for affordable housing development, but we still need those development dollars. And they identified two bills. The first bill is Senate Bill 795. And this is a measure that would restore a property tax-based financing mechanism. And this mechanism would focus on building affordable housing and infill infrastructure. This would provide, if passed, around $2 billion annually for the state of California. The next one is ACA 1, which is the Affordable Housing and Public Infrastructure. But really what it is, it's a measure that would allow voters to lower the voter approval threshold from 2/3 to 55% for local general obligation bonds, sales tax, and parcel tax, as long as the proceeds go to an investment in affordable housing and infrastructure. So it provides additional options for local jurisdictions to really get the needed funding to make this affordable housing a reality. The next is that cities will take immediate action. So we already see some of these coming down the pipeline. Adopting an accessory dwelling unit or an ADU ordinance. We're already working on that. Streamlining housing approval processes. They have some others. There's a long list of them, from establishing a workforce housing opportunity zone or a local housing trust, upzoning single family zoning to fourplexes. They have a long list of examples, but essentially, again, creating that regulatory framework that allows for development. And then the last one is kind of beyond what local jurisdictions can do. And this is the one that they wanted to go to the legislature and work with them on, because we can't really affect these things. So it's construction costs, new building codes, CEQA costs and delays, financing, really tackling those issues that still play a role in affordable housing development, but we can't really create the regulatory framework to get around those. Next slide, please. And then the last bucket, which we're gonna have to do anyways, but the long term is the league supports cities accommodating the 6th cycle of RHNA with an emphasis on focusing on density near key transit infrastructure, downtown areas, and commercial corridors. Next slide, please. And so that pretty much concludes my presentation. That was just a quick update on HCD and some of the resources that they have available, and then also what was the plan of the League of Cities back in March, which I'm sure has slightly changed, but useful information nonetheless.
Thank you so much. This is just outstanding, Commissioner Escobedo. And I know it was very, very helpful for everyone. I'm going to turn my webcam off, and if other commissioners would like to come on and either ask questions or provide comments, I would very much like to hear from everyone. Commissioner Reed, you want to kick off questions and comments?
Yeah, just Commissioner Escobedo, I mean, wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
I had no idea that it would be this depth of information and how applicable to the city's objectives at this point. So, I mean, there's so much to dive into here. And I think we'll all be doing that, and this gives us the pretense to do it. So just thank you. Job well done.
Thank you.
Any questions, Commissioner Reed, at this time, or just your comments?
I'll have plenty, but there's a lot I need to work through.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, I think Commissioner Bonderson might be next. I didn't see who came on quite as quickly. Yes, Commissioner Bonderson, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Escobedo, thank you so much. I have been anticipating this presentation for so long. I've been waiting and waiting, and I'm so glad to finally get a chance to hear all the wonderful experiences you had there, and also for what you've shared with me personally. It's been very nice to see it all kind of brought together into a single presentation, and it was very well done. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of I'm sure you're going to be commended quite a bit here today, but I just wanted to make voices, and it was really, really well executed, and I'm sure you had so much information to bring together. To be able to do it so concisely is really something that is noteworthy. For sharing finally, and looking forward to hearing more when we have a chance.
Thank you.
And then as we go to Commissioner Wiscombe, Commissioner Escobedo, if you could send your presentation to Ms. Rydell to distribute to the full commission, if that's okay with you, I think that will be greatly appreciated. And I'm anticipating that I'm going to look very carefully at each of those components that you've shared for follow-on items for this commission. Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to echo what my fellow commissioners Reed and Bonderson said. It was just a superb presentation, very well organized and very clear. Are we doing anything about this LEAP grant, that Commissioner Escobedo, that you know of at this point with this deadline looming?
Not that I know of, but maybe Miss DeBus can.
Oh, there she is. She's back.
I am back. Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Wiscombe. The city is planning to apply for the LEAP grant, and we anticipate being in front of the City Council in June in order to make the July 1st submittal deadline.
That's great. That's great news. Thank you very much for that. Well, I will look forward to getting the PowerPoint, and I'm sure that we all have lots of questions, but it was just so well organized, and you gave us so much information, and I think you gave us a little bit of hope too. That's which is really, really important in these times. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Higgins, questions, comments?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Escobedo. It's a nice reminder that we are capable of getting involved in more than just CDPs. So we have a broader scope, and you just stretched it even more broadly out. So it's a good reminder, and it does actually, it is a nice reminder that we have greater scope of work or service, and it is optimistic and hopeful. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Commissioner, thank you, Commissioner Higgins. And Commissioner Escobedo, once you send that presentation to us, I think personally what I'm going to do as chair is look those sections that you've brought forward and maybe even chat with you further, and then approach staff to see if it would be appropriate for them to give us briefings as is feasible to fold into our hearings, because much is unfolding in Sacramento, both with funding and legislation. And I think we're going to continue to see a high state of evolution in that regard due to the pandemic, trying to cope in all ways as we move through and hopefully come out of that in due time. Commissioner Lodge, questions, comments?
Commissioner Lodge, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself.
I'm sorry. I want to include my compliments. It was an excellent presentation. Thank you. I do want to make a comment about the last point about the removing the priority overlay from Milpas Street. When staff did that, but then in the process that you showed a map that showed still the donut hole downtown. That was filled in and it was extended up State Street to Mission, the overlay. And in that process, there were considerably more, the potential for considerably more units than there were removed from Milpas Street.
I apologize for including that map.
Pardon me? Yes, thank you.
I apologize. You're correct. I did include the map before the density in the donut hole was raised, so I apologize for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. Commissioner Wiscombe, additional thoughts on the presentation?
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Madam Chair. I do. There's so much information here, and there is a lot of hope here. And I'm wondering if council or several council members would consider working with Commissioner Escobedo and another planning commissioner to actually, do some heavy lifting on some of the information that was presented here to perhaps advance it into what will eventually become housing. That's just a thought of mine. I think we've got a lot of meat here to go on, and I think it would be a very useful way to spend planning commissioner and city council time if it was, a small group of people that did a lot of brainstorming. That's just a thought.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. Well, to not get ahead of ourselves, and I'm sure Ms. Ostranger is listening in to ensure we're staying within the guardrails of this item, but certainly there are sort of many tracks, I'll say, of paths of efforts that are underway right now. Some of them are within the city government structure. Some of them are with community stakeholder involvement. I don't have to get into identifying these various efforts. And then even on the legislative side, as Council Member Friedman brought up just recently, the Council Legislative Committee is, I think, going to become more activated. And so, Commissioner Wiscombe, I too am thinking that there are potential new opportunities for us, perhaps collaborating with a couple of council members. We'll take that up and brainstorm that, and Ms. Ostranger can also help us navigate that within appropriate legal confines. But again, back to you, Commissioner Escobedo. Thank you so much for this. And I'm just thrilled that you had the opportunity to attend this pre-COVID-19, because just to attend in person, I know how valuable that is. Years ago, I attended the Planning Commissioners Academy, and I think it's been significantly expanded and, quite frankly, improved over the years. And I know other commissioners who are still on the commission have also attended. We'll see if we have the opportunities in years ahead with budgetary constraints and so forth. But again, thank you, and we'll look forward to you forwarding the presentation to us.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of my fellow commissioners for all of your kind comments. I appreciate it.
Okay, with that, we are going to move to our next administrative agenda. This is item 4C on page 3 of our staff report. These are revisions to advisory board liaison appointments. We have two additions, well, one change, one addition that we're going to make. So for everyone on the commission, you received a new matrix. I shouldn't say a new matrix, the matrix from Miguel. The two areas that we're going to need to be updated today. One is the staff hearing officer. And I had a conversation with Commissioner Higgins. He was gracious enough to allow me to step out of my primary role with the show, staff hearing officer, and he's going to take that on. And the reason I asked him to do that is I have found myself as chair this year, and both planning for and conducting virtual hearings, along with a great deal of communication and coordination with staff on many significant items that are coming to us. And so it was a bit of a labor relief for me to have Commissioner Higgins' willingness to move over there. So we're going to change that on our liaison list. And then we have the new item. It's on the bottom of the second page, the very last item, Water Vision Stakeholders Group. And you'll recall that Commissioner Wiscombe gave a presentation to us at our last hearing from her work as our liaison to the Water Commission. So this new 18-member Water Vision Stakeholders Group is going to be meeting, let's see if I recall correctly, over a period of 18 months, I believe. And I've asked Commissioner Escobedo, who has shown an interest in water issues and who has the time, to be our liaison. We don't need an alternate. We just have one slot. So we're going to list that as P for primary with a notation that there is no alternate. And so that will be a change. And then once that is done by Ms. Rydell, then what we're going to do is we're going to update this and then correctly recalculate on the bottom of the second page the primary liaison totals, alternate liaison totals, and get the math there correct. It was a little off, and Ms. Rydell now has that corrected information. So unless staff would like to say anything else about this, I'll take a moment, and I don't know if it's Mr. Busk or Ms. Rydell or any other staff members. Those are the two items that we needed to take up today. Of course, if any other commissioners are finding that the assignments they volunteered for are creating any hardships whatsoever, if your schedules have changed or for any other reason, please don't hesitate to turn on your webcams now and let me know before what I'm going to consider to be a finalized 2020 PC liaison list. Okay, I don't see any other changes. So staff, if you would please take those up and make those additions and then mathematical corrections, that would be great. Now we're going to go to committee and liaison reports. And I don't know if we have a first staff hearing officer liaison report from Commissioner Higgins. Is there anything to provide us in that area, Commissioner Higgins?
I did attend one, must have been 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it was an ADU. We're still in that same procedure where the coastal zone ADUs are announced at a hearing, but they're not discussed or deliberated on. So it's sort of an interesting band-aid to ADU law in the coastal zone. And then the last meeting that could have happened was canceled due to the lack of an agenda. So interestingly, the feedback, last time I was on the show liaison, we were under the old zoning ordinance, and staff is actually seeing a lot less activity coming through the show because of our new zoning ordinance has improved some permitting efficiencies in that regard. So that's my report.
So I take it no appeals from show to us at this time.
Correct.
Oh, that's good news. Okay. Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Higgins. Now we're on to other committee and liaison reports. Is there anything else from other commissioners to brief us on today? Commissioner Bonderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, fellow commissioners. I have a liaison report for ABR. We've had three regular ABR meetings since the last time we saw one another and had a chance to report. But I do want to begin with a different committee that I'm also responsible for, the Transportation and Circulation Committee. They had a scheduled meeting on April 23rd, which was canceled. I just want to bring that up to say that that meeting was expected and did not take place. And therefore, that's all I want to say about that, just that it was supposed to happen and it didn't take place. And then I will move forward with the ABR. On April 20th, Architectural Board of Review met, and there's one project I'd like to bring to your attention. It was a project at 825 Della Vina Street. It was reviewed for concept review, and this project is located, of course, within the historical sensitive area, which is why it is in particular interest. The project proposal was for a 4-story mixed-use project on a site that's currently developed with a private surface level parking lot. And this project is using the AUD program. It will entail construction of 39,208 square foot, 21 unit rental complex. And it will have 689 square feet dedicated to commercial floor space. So as you can see, it's a mixed use project. The mixed use includes 3 4-bedroom units, 1 3-bedroom unit, 3 1-bedroom unit, and 14 studio units ranging in size. The average unit size is 759 square feet. So 2 of those units will be designated for inclusionary housing. And the proposed density on that is 14,625 square feet lot. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. The proposed density for that lot, which is 14,625 square feet, will be 62. So 62 dwelling units per acre on this site. And it's within priority housing overlay, which allows between 37 and 63. So it's right up at the top end of that at 62. The proposal includes 23 parking spaces and 40 bicycle parking spaces, which is also noteworthy. So no final appeal decisions were made at this hearing, and the motion was to continue it indefinitely with comments. If anyone's interested in those comments, please feel free to look online. Everything's been recorded in the minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonderson, because that project will be coming to the Planning Commission. And in fact, Commissioner Lodge, you'll recall this, you and I were on the commission back in the day when a project of a different incarnation on that same parcel came to the commission. So this will be interesting as many changes have been made for it to come back to the commission. Look forward to that. Did you have another item, I think, as well?
I do. There is a total of 4. I'll try to keep the others more brief. The first one was kind of the juiciest one with a lot of data. The other ones are also noteworthy, but they're not quite packed full with information. So the next project was seen on May 4th, different date, and it was for concept review at 604 East Ortega Street. This project was last reviewed in September 9th, 2019. So this is the first time it's come back. The proposed project is for renovations to Ortega Park. And it consists of the Ortega Park master plan, which will include a new swimming pool, a wading pool, water slide, skate park, splash pad. I can go on and on and on, but it's basically a sports focused facility. And it will also include buildings for restrooms and maintenance on the site. Site improvements will include a long list of things as well. Without listing everything, I'll just give you a general idea that it's fencing, parking, general landscape, related enclosures for garbage, walkways, etc. So the park is considered a community park and a sports facility and a community building. And this is all per City Council's resolution of 17-074. So that might be something that you might remember seeing or hearing about. And it's interesting to finally see this project come back again. No final appeal decisions were made at this hearing. And there was a motion to continue again, to the Planning Commission, so we are going to see this. And there was a series of comments. So if any of you, my fellow commissioners, are interested in catching up on this one, please view it online. The comments are listed and you can see the plans and so on as well. Any questions?
No, we'll just do briefings right now on the liaison.
Very good. Let's see, I just want to make sure I'm not going out of order here. Okay.
That's okay to go out of order.
Thanks. The next one is also on May 4th, so I'm actually still in order. The project came in for project design approval, and this project is at 1717 Thomas Avenue. This project is a more recent project that we've seen just back on April 22nd that came back in quite quickly. The proposal is for 2 new residential units using average unit size density. So it is using the AUD program. The project will consist of 2 existing residences on site and the construction of 3-car garage, 3-car garage with 2 second-story units. So there's a change to the configuration. The unit mix will include 1 2-bedroom unit and 3 1-bedroom units. They range in size from 437 to 734 square feet with an average unit size of 539 square feet. The proposed density on the parcel is 27 dwelling units per acre on the lot with a general planned land use designation of medium high. The project design approval was requested, but was continued indefinitely to consent. And again, there are comments on that decision that follow the motion. So please feel free to see those. Last but not least, if there aren't any comments here, I'll continue to May 11th, which was the most recent hearing just at the beginning of this week, a few days ago. On May 11th, project came in for review at 2015 State Street. And this project came in for design approval and final approval. This project proposes alterations and additions to a parcel developed currently as mixed use. The project entails the remodel of a 492 square foot, 1-story commercial structure, which includes new windows, roof, and exterior paint. The 2,980 square foot, 2-story mixed use structure contains 2 residential units and 1 commercial unit, and is also proposed to be remodeled with new doors, roofs, exterior paints, etc. There's also a 411 square foot addition that is proposed for the 2nd story of this mixed use structure. And there's no changes for any parking spaces that are proposed. So this project design and final approval was requested. However, it was continued 1 week. We're expecting to see it again in about 10 days on the 25th if it comes back in a timely manner. And if we are expecting it to receive that final approval, design and final approval. So just expect to see it coming back. And the next ABR meeting will be on Monday, May 25th, as I mentioned. So those are the 4
Thank you.
projects at the moment.
ABR is always very active and requires a great deal of time involvement, time investment by any one of our commissioners who has that liaison role. So thank you so much. And it sounds like 3 of these 4 projects are going to come to Planning Commission. So I anticipate, through the rest of the year, we're really going to have a full plate, which is very exciting. Thank you again. Commissioner Reed, I think you were up next.
Thank you, Chair Schwartz. There was a downtown parking committee meeting this morning, and not a ton of relevance to the Planning Commission, but I'll share a few specifics. So there was a review of the updated fiscal year 20 budget, and they reported a $2.5 million shortfall in revenue. And I think that's that's applicable to this commission because we will be reviewing the upcoming AUD presentation, and parking in lieu fees will be a consideration, and a dollar amount will be discussed. So in the context of this economic crisis, there will be different considerations. Part of the agenda was the introduction of Jason Harris, the new economic development manager, and the committee made comments during that time. This wasn't a recommendation, a formal recommendation, but in the commentary, it was interesting to see that the parking committee suggested to Jason that they want downtown parking assets to play a role in the revitalization plan for the downtown core. So not necessarily the entire central business district, but the 0 blocks, say from Sola to Gutierrez. And that's both in the context of the public right-of-way, so creative social benefits for sidewalks, but also for housing development and the use of downtown parking assets. So the committee at least is very supportive of that. And it's encouraging to see them involve Jason Harris in the conversation, who's a great mediator between departments. That's it.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to report, last Friday, we had a remote committee meeting of the De La Guerra Plaza Renovation Committee. And I'm going to give a big shout out to Commissioner Reed, who attended his first meeting and just contributed so much to the discussion. It was just wonderful. And I thank him for that. So we basically, each committee member had a 30-minute interview prior to our meeting with Rob Dayton. And he asked some very specific questions which related to the purpose. What is the purpose of the renovation? And he came up with kind of a summary of all our comments on that. He had asked 3 specific questions, and then we all convened the committee meeting last Friday, and we had an hour and a half to make a 1-sentence purpose statement, and we accomplished it in a committee that has a lot of diversity. So I really, Commissioner Reed really did contribute a lot to it. So I'm just going to read you the purpose statement that the committee came up with. De La Guerra Plaza celebrates and honors the historic heart of our city and provides the flexibility to serve our community's diverse social, cultural, historic, economic, and environmental vitality. And we didn't all agree at the beginning, but we all came together with that statement at the end. So it was quite a victory. So that's all I have to report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, that's what we need to do on every front this year, isn't it? Commissioner Escobedo, updates for us?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yesterday, I attended the Parks and Recreation Commission, and I just wanted to start out by saying their creativity in addressing the current circumstances has been fantastic to see. They continue their food distributions, their senior lunches. They continue to monitor some of our precious resources, the beaches and our parks, to make sure that individuals are social distancing so that they can remain open for our city. Recent updates, they recently just opened up the golf course with social distancing practices. They've also opened up the tennis courts, and they are looking at trying to find out a process for setting up the sand volleyball nets with social distancing and consideration, the Los Baños pools and the skate park. And right now they're talking about using a reservation system in order to limit the amount of people that are using those resources. Other than that, they gave us a budget update, which a lot of departments are being asked to do. I believe they go before City Council next week, so that'll be interesting to see. But some good news on the horizon is they just had some projects that are close to being done next month. So the Bonnet Park restroom remodel is scheduled to be done next month. The Chase Palm Park Center renovation is scheduled to be done next month. And Cabrillo Pavilion, which I've spoken about, that renovation is scheduled to be done next month. So that's some positive news for the Parks and Recreation Commission. But for the Parks and Rec Department, I again just want to give them kudos for just really navigating a really precarious time.
It looks like we lost Chair Schwartz. I see, Chair Schwartz, can you try saying something? It looks like your microphone, looks like we just lost her. Can I ask Vice Chair Wiscombe to come on and continue the meeting? Oh wait, you're muted.
Thank you, Ms. Cookinda.
Sorry.
Did I just hear Chair Schwartz?
I don't think so. It says that she's totally offline, so she might have gotten disconnected.
Okay. Are there any other committee and liaison reports from any of my fellow commissioners? Okay. I don't know if Chair Schwartz had any closing words, but I will say that, you know, there's a very extensive and intensive City Council budget discussion going on. You can get the information online in terms of when everyone's presentation is being scheduled. I can't grab it now, but next week, I believe it's on Monday, there's just a slight change in the schedule. I don't know if it's been updated online, but one of the presentations is going to include capital projects, and that was a slight change that they announced yesterday when they were doing the city administration department's budget. So the council will be gathering all that information, and then they will be making comments and decisions on the budget. And I think the budget needs to be finalized for FY 2021, which begins on July 1st. It needs to be finalized by June 16th. So that's where we are in that process. We do have a planning commission meeting next week. I think Mr. Rydell can confirm that, right? If she's still with us, or
yes, I'm still here, and I can confirm that we do have a planning commission meeting next week, and I sent you all the PC updates email.
Okay, thank you for doing that. And with no further business, we will adjourn the meeting, and thank you all very much.
Thank you.